Kelechi Obi sat alone in his big living room. The ceiling was high, the floors were shiny, and his family's servants walked around quietly. Even though he was surrounded by so many fancy things, Kelechi felt empty. He stared at the marble tiles and thought about his life. People saw him as the rich and handsome son of Chief Obi, one of the most powerful men in Lagos. But on the inside, Kelechi felt trapped, like he was wearing a mask that he could never take off. His best friend, Emeka, knocked lightly on the door and then walked in. Emeka was one of the few people Kelechi trusted. He wasn't there for the money. He liked Kelechi for who he was. Emeka looked at Kelechi's sad eyes and said, "Hey, my guy, what's wrong? You look like someone took your favorite meal away." Kelechi sighed. "Emeka, I'm tired," he said, his voice low. "Every day, people keep asking me for favors or money. They don't even see me as a person. I'm just a bank to them. Last week was my birthday, but none of my guests seemed to care about me. They only wanted to take pictures and brag that they were at a big party." Emeka nodded. "I know, Kels. That party was so loud. Everybody was drinking and dancing, but you looked unhappy the whole time. Have you talked to your dad about how you feel?" Kelechi shook his head. "Chief Obi is too busy. He thinks I'm fine because I have money and a big house. He always says, money solves everything. But, Emeka, I want something real. I want to meet people who don't care about my name or what I own." Emeka walked closer and put a hand on Kelechi's shoulder. "So what do you want to do?" Kelechi stood up and looked around the wide room. He saw his reflection in a giant mirror. He was wearing an expensive shirt and gold watch. "I wish I could start over somewhere nobody knows me," he said in a soft voice. "I want to see if I can be normal. Maybe find friends who like me for me." Emeka's eyes lit up. Maybe you can. You can step away for a while. Just go off-grid." Kelechi turned to Emeka with a sudden spark in his eyes. "What if I pretend to be someone else?" he asked, the idea sounding both exciting and scary. "What if I go to Surulere, or someplace not so fancy, and live a simple life?" Emeka gave a small laugh. "You? Live without air conditioning and private cars? I never thought I'd see the day." But he noticed Kelechi's serious face. "Wait, you're not joking, are you?" Kelechi walked over to the window. He could see the tall fence around the family home, the gardeners trimming flowers, and the security guards standing at the gate. "I'm serious," he said. "I think I can learn some trade, something with my hands. I took a carpentry class once. Do you remember? It was during that summer holiday in England." Emeka folded his arms. "You did, but you complained about getting sawdust in your hair," he teased. Then he became serious. "But if this is what you want, I'll support you. How do you plan to make it work?" Kelechi turned around, and his voice grew stronger. "I'll move out quietly. I won't tell my dad. If I do, he'll send an army of drivers and guards to watch me. I can rent a room in Surulere under a fake name. I'll say I'm a carpenter just starting out. No flashy suits. No expensive shoes. I'll do my best to fit in." Emeka still looked unsure, but he nodded slowly. "That might be hard, but if anyone can do it, you can. You're stubborn like that." He paused. "But be careful, Kels. If people find out who you really are, it could cause big drama." "Drama is something I'm used to," Kelechi said, a small smile forming. "At least this time I'll be in control. I have to try. I need to know there are good people in this world who don't only see money." Just then, they heard footsteps in the hallway. A maid tapped on the door. "Sir, your father wants to see you in the study," she said. Her eyes darted around nervously, sensing tension in the air. Kelechi exchanged a look with Emeka. He was sure Chief Obi wanted to discuss business or some family matter. "Tell him I'll be there soon," he replied. When the maid left, Kelechi swallowed hard. "You see, I can't even have a moment of peace in my own house." Emeka moved toward the door. "Let's go, or he'll come looking for you. You know how he can be." They walked down the long corridor, passing huge paintings and large, gold-framed family photos. In each picture, Chief Obi stood tall and proud. Kelechi felt a pang of guilt as he thought about his plan. He knew his father had worked hard to build their fortune. But Kelechi wanted to work for something, too, on his own terms. When they reached the study, Chief Obi was on the phone, talking loudly. He waved them in without stopping his call. Kelechi and Emeka stood there until he was done. Finally, Chief Obi hung up and fixed a serious look on his son. Kelechi, Chief Obi said, his voice strong. Where were you last night? I heard you refused to join our family dinner. You can't keep missing these important gatherings. Kelechi dipped his head. I'm sorry, father. I didn't feel well. He didn't add that he felt tired of the endless business talk and constant showy behavior that came with those dinners. Chief Obi studied him. You're no longer a child. You must step up. The Obi name carries weight. You can't just hide in your room or go out without telling me. Kelechi glanced at Emeka, then back at his father. I know, sir, he said quietly. It won't happen again. Chief Obi nodded, satisfied for now. He turned to Emeka with a polite smile. Emeka, tell your parents I send my greetings. Emeka gave a small bow. Yes, Chief Obi. The meeting ended there. Kelechi followed Emeka back to his room, feeling relieved that his father didn't keep questioning him. As soon as he shut the door, Kelechi let out a long breath. You see, this is what I deal with. I can't be honest with him right now. He would never let me go through with my plan. Emeka leaned against the wall. So you're going to do it? Just like that? Kelechi opened his closet and pulled out a small suitcase. Then he grabbed a plain t-shirt and jeans from a drawer. He looked at his reflection again, noticing the worry lines on his forehead. Yes, he said, more to himself than anyone else. I'll leave tomorrow or the day after. I'll pack only a few things so I don't draw attention. You're the only one who knows about this. Emeka walked closer and gently patted Kelechi's shoulder. All right, bro. I'm here for you. But please be careful. If you need money for anything, just say the word. And if your dad starts asking me questions, I'll cover for you as best as I can. Kelechi gave a small, grateful smile. Thank you, Emeka. I appreciate it. This is something I need to do alone. I want to find real peace and maybe even real love. I can't find it in this big house. He zipped his suitcase and set it beside his bed. As dusk fell outside, the lights in the mansion flickered on. Kelechi turned off his phone, his heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and excitement. He thought for a moment about what might be waiting for him in Surulere, a place he hardly knew. He had no idea if people would accept him, or if he could keep up the act. But one thing was clear, he was ready to try. At that moment, he felt more alive than ever. Tomorrow, Kelechi whispered to himself, patting the suitcase. I'll begin again. He shut his bedroom door firmly, shutting out the noise of servants moving around. In that quiet space, Kelechi's determination grew stronger. He wanted a new life. He wanted to meet someone who would care about him, not his money. And if he had to pretend to be a poor carpenter to find that, he was ready. He was ready to give it his all. Early the next morning, Kelechi slipped out of his family mansion with just one small bag. He made sure no one saw him. The gates were still quiet, and the guards were half asleep. Kelechi's heart pounded as he walked onto the main road. A passing taxi stopped and he got in. He felt free and scared at the same time. When he reached Surulere, the taxi drove past rows of busy shops and houses packed close together. People sold food by the roadside, and loud music played from nearby speakers. This was nothing like the clean and quiet neighborhood where Kelechi grew up. He breathed in the thick smell of exhaust fumes mixed with freshly fried akara. It was overwhelming, but he also felt a strange excitement inside him. He paid the taxi driver and got out near a crowded street. Everything around him buzzed with life. He looked at his phone one more time to check the address Emeka had given him. There was a small one-room apartment waiting for him on the corner. He spotted the building's peeling paint and broken fence. A man stood outside with a bunch of keys, waiting. You must be Kola, the man said, giving Kelechi a friendly nod. He introduced himself as Mr. Dada, the caretaker. Kelechi forced a smile, hoping he seemed like a regular guy. Yes, sir, he replied, keeping his voice calm. Thank you for letting me rent this place on short notice. Mr. Dada shrugged. No problem. but the power goes off sometimes, and the water tap does not always flow. Make sure you fetch water early." Kelechi tried to look unfazed, even though he had never handled these issues on his own before. He followed Mr. Dada inside. The room was small with cracked walls. An overhead fan turned slowly, making a soft, squeaky sound. It was so different from his father's mansion. But Kelechi reminded himself this was exactly what he wanted. A new start. After dropping off his bag, he stepped outside to explore. The sun was hot, and the noise of cars never seemed to stop. He saw children running around barefoot and people calling out to customers. His first goal was to find a place he could use as a carpentry workshop. He walked through the busy market area. Wooden stalls lined the edges of the road, selling fruits, clothes, and household items. Kelechi spotted a small, empty stall covered with an old roof sheet. It stood near a corner where people often passed by. He asked around and found the owner of that stall, a stout woman who everyone called Mama Chichi. "You want to rent my stall?" she asked, eyeing Kelechi with curiosity. "Are you sure? We don't do credit here." "Oh," Kelechi nodded. "I have some savings," he answered politely. "I want to start a carpentry shop." Mama Chichi laughed a bit. "We'll see," she said, handing him a key. "Pay up each week. If you don't pay, I'll kick you out." She wasn't smiling, so Kelechi quickly agreed. Inside the stall, Kelechi realized he had almost no idea how to decorate a workshop. He only had a hammer, a small saw, and some nails he bought from a hardware store nearby. But he refused to give up. He swept the floor, wiped the wooden walls, and set his tools neatly in a corner. By midday, sweat poured down his face. People passing by stared at him. One curious boy, Toby, pointed and said, "Oga wood," before running off, laughing. Kelechi tried not to feel embarrassed. Instead, he told himself that each small step was helping him build a new life. Later that afternoon, his phone buzzed. The screen showed a number from his father's office. Kelechi's heart jumped. He stepped outside and pressed the phone to his ear. A firm voice greeted him. "Mr. Kelechi, your father wants to know your location. He says there's an urgent business matter." Kelechi swallowed hard, sweat prickling his forehead. He calmly replied, "I'm on a self-discovery retreat. Tell him I'll call back soon." Before the secretary could say more, he ended the call, feeling a knot of worry in his chest. He hoped he could keep fooling his father's people for a while longer. As evening came, the street lights flickered on. Kelechi decided to buy some food from a nearby stall. He chose a plate of jollof rice and fried plantain, the spicy aroma making his stomach rumble. While he ate, he thought about his plan. He knew he had to improve his carpentry skills fast, or no one would bring him their furniture. If people found out he was just a rich man pretending, they would laugh at him or, worse, feel angry at his lies. He finished his meal and promised himself he would work harder the next day. On his way back, he noticed a slim woman passing by the market. She carried a heavy bag, and her face looked tired, but there was a certain glow about her. Kelechi slowed his steps, curious. He didn't know her name, but something about her quiet strength caught his attention. She glanced briefly at him, then continued on her way. He felt a small flutter in his chest that he couldn't explain. Surulere was definitely not like his old life in Ikoyi, but maybe that was a good thing. When he finally returned to his tiny room, the lights were off. The power had gone out just as Mr. Dada warned. Kelechi lit a candle and lay on his thin mattress. He listened to the constant sound of cars outside and wondered what tomorrow would bring. He thought of the workshop he had set up, the strange new neighbors, and the woman he saw walking with such determination. His mind spun with possibilities. He was far from home, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he might be truly living. Kelechi woke up the next morning to the loud crowing of a rooster outside his window. He sat up on his thin mattress, blinking at the weak daylight that peeked through his dusty curtains. Even though the night had been hot and noisy, he felt a strange burst of energy. He was still getting used to Surulere's hustle, but at least now he had a goal: make his carpentry workshop successful. He washed his face in the little bowl of water he fetched last night, changed into a faded t-shirt and headed out. When he reached his small stall, he found Toby, the mischievous boy from the other day, already there, peering at the tools. Toby looked up with a grin. "Oga Wood, good morning," the boy said, bouncing on his heels. "Will you teach me how to hammer nails today?" Kelechi couldn't help but smile. He had never spent much time around kids, but Toby's excitement was contagious. "Sure, if you promise not to run off with my tools," Kelechi joked, patting Toby on the shoulder. He spent a few minutes showing Toby how to hold a hammer carefully. Toby's eyes gleamed with excitement. Suddenly, a soft voice spoke from behind them. "Excuse me, is this the carpenter's workshop?" Kelechi turned around and saw the same woman he had noticed in the market. Her expression was shy but determined. She held a broken wooden stool under one arm. "Yes, you're in the right place," Kelechi said, stepping forward. He wiped his slightly sweaty hands on his jeans. "I'm Kola," he added, using the name he had chosen for his new life. "How can I help you?" The woman looked at him with tired eyes but gave a polite smile. "My name is Yawanda. I have this old stool that keeps wobbling. Can you fix it?" Kelechi gently took the stool from her. One leg was cracked, and the top looked worn out. "I can try," he said, glancing at the broken spot. "I might need to replace the leg or strengthen it with new wood." Yawanda nodded, brushing her braided hair away from her face. "How much will it cost?" she asked, sounding cautious. Kelechi studied her expression. He didn't want to scare her off with a high price. In truth, he wasn't sure how much to charge. Back in his old life, he never had to set prices for anything. But now, he wanted to be fair. "Well," he began slowly, "it depends on how long it takes me, but I promise it won't be too expensive. Maybe you can pay me after I'm done, and we'll see how it looks." Yawanda's face softened a bit. "Thank you," she said, sounding relieved. She introduced herself more fully. "I live not too far from here with my son, Femi. We don't have much furniture, so I'd be really grateful if you can save this stool." Kelechi nodded. He could see she was a person who took care of things and did her best with limited resources. He noticed Toby was listening closely. "Auntie Yawanda, Oga Wood is a new carpenter in this area, but he's good," Toby chimed in with a wide grin. Yawanda smiled kindly at Toby, then turned back to Kelechi. "I'll come back later in the afternoon to see if it's ready, if that's okay." Kelechi agreed, promising to do his best. As she left, he felt a small flutter in his chest. He was drawn to her gentle nature. Something about her reminded him of the honesty he'd been searching for. After Yawanda walked away, Kelechi got to work. He removed the damaged leg from the stool and measured a piece of wood that matched its size. Even though he had taken a carpentry class long ago, he was a little rusty. He carefully cut the new piece, checking the edges until they aligned just right. Then he tested the other legs for balance. It took him almost 2 hours to fix the stool properly, and sweat dripped down his forehead. Toby wandered off to play, leaving Kelechi alone with his thoughts. While sanding the edges, Kelechi imagined what it would be like if someone fixed things for him the way he was fixing this stool. Could he repair the cracks in his own life by living here, quietly and honestly? He remembered the worried tone in his father's secretary's voice. He knew it wouldn't be long before Chief Obi tried to track him down. Still, he pushed that thought aside. Right now, he had a new focus: Surrelir, carpentry, and the possibility of meeting good people like Yawanda. Around midday, Yawanda returned as promised. This time, she had a curious look in her eyes. She also had a small bag of roasted groundnuts in her hand. "I'm back," she said quietly. "Any luck with the stool?" Kelechi stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yes, I think it's fixed. Let me show you." He placed the stool on a flat area of the workshop and gently pressed each corner. The stool stood firm. Yawanda tested it as well, sitting carefully. "It's not shaking at all," she said in a relieved tone. "Thank you so much, Kola. How much do I owe you?" Kelechi glanced down, feeling a bit uncomfortable about taking her money. "I used some spare wood, so let's just say 500 naira, he replied, picking a modest sum he hoped wouldn't worry her. Yawanda nodded, opening her small purse to pay him. Then she held out the roasted groundnuts. "I bought these for you," she said softly. As a little thank you. Kelechi smiled, touched by her thoughtfulness. He wasn't used to people giving him things from the kindness of their hearts. "Thanks," he said, accepting the bag. While she was still there, Yawanda hesitated for a moment. Then she spoke. "I actually have a small wooden bench at home that's a bit shaky. I'd like you to look at it sometime, if you don't mind." "Of course," Kelechi said quickly, his heart feeling light. "I can come by tomorrow. Just let me know where you live." Her cheeks seemed to warm just a little. "It's down the street, number 14, right behind the old shop. You'll see a green door." She carefully balanced the stool in her arms. "Thank you again," she said, and then she left with a small wave. When Yawanda was gone, Kelechi noticed Toby peeking from behind another stall. The boy grinned. "Oga Wood, you have a new customer now," he said, wiggling his eyebrows playfully. Kelechi laughed. "Yes, I guess I do," he said. Inside, though, he felt more than just the satisfaction of a new customer. He felt the first true excitement he'd experienced since leaving his old home. Later in the afternoon, a few people stopped by, asking if Kelechi could fix their loose chair legs or broken door hinges. He tried not to show how clumsy he still was, but each job helped him improve. He managed to earn a bit of money, which he tucked safely in his pocket. It wasn't much, but it felt good, like he was standing on his own 2 feet for the first time in his life. By evening, the noise of the marketplace began to die down. As Kelechi cleaned his work area, his mind drifted back to Yawanda. He remembered the quiet strength in her voice and the calm way she thanked him. He also recalled how her face lit up when she saw the stool standing firmly. That moment of pure gratitude touched him deeply, making him realize that not all warmth comes from luxury. Sometimes, it comes from caring for one another in small, honest ways. Before locking up, he took out his phone and saw a few missed calls from unknown numbers. He guessed they might be from his father's office or perhaps from Emeka, worried about him. He decided not to call back. He would handle it later. For now, he was Kola, a carpenter who had just fixed his first piece of furniture in Surulere, and in doing so, felt a glimmer of hope that he might also fix the emptiness inside himself. Heading back to his little room, Kelechi hummed a low tune. The streetlights flickered, and the air was thick with the smell of roasting corn. He climbed the cracked steps up to his rented room and settled in for the night. As he lay on the mattress, he clutched the bag of roasted groundnuts Yawanda had given him, thinking about how simple gifts could mean so much. Tomorrow, he would see her again, and he wondered if that meeting might lead him closer to the genuine love he had been craving. For the first time in years, he drifted off to sleep with a light heart, ready for whatever surprises Surulere had in store for him. Kelechi woke up early again, his heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. He remembered the moment Yawanda smiled at him after he fixed her stool, and the way she said thanks with such warmth. That simple memory made him eager to face a new day in Surulere. He quickly cleaned up, ate a small piece of bread, and headed out to his carpentry stall. When he arrived, the market was already alive. People were shouting prices for fruits and vegetables, and children ran between stalls playing games. Toby was there again, standing at Kelechi's stall with his hands behind his back like he was guarding a treasure. "Oga Wood, I got here before you today," Toby called out, flashing a big grin. Kelechi laughed. "You're very serious, Toby. Are you my new assistant?" he teased. "Yes," Toby exclaimed, jumping up and down. "Maybe one day, I'll own my own workshop too." Before Kelechi could reply, he heard a gentle voice from behind. Yawanda stood there with a small smile. She looked tired, but her eyes shone with hope. "Good morning, Kola," she said. "If you have time, can you come look at that bench I told you about?" Kelechi nodded quickly. "Of course. Let me just lock up my tools." He grabbed a small padlock and secured the stall. Toby seemed a little sad to see them go. "Don't worry," Kelechi told Toby. "I'll be back soon, and you can watch the stall for me." Toby's face lit up, and he stood tall, pretending to be in charge. Yawanda's home was not far from the market, just as she'd said. It was a small building with a green door and peeling paint. When they went inside, Kelechi noticed the simple furnishings: a worn-out couch, a small table, and a narrow hallway leading to 2 other rooms. A little boy was in the living room, playing quietly with a toy car. At first, he looked unsure, but then Yewande called him over. "Femi, come say hello," Yewande said softly, motioning the boy forward. "This is Kola, the carpenter I told you about." Femi stood and walked over. He appeared shy but curious. Kelechi knelt down and offered a small smile. "Hi, Femi. Nice to meet you." Femi mumbled a hello and clutched his car close. Yewande led Kelechi to the old wooden bench. One of its legs was loose, and there was a crack across the seat. Kelechi examined it carefully. "I'll need to tighten these screws and maybe add a piece of wood underneath for support," he explained. Yewande watched him closely. He caught her studying his hands, noticing how he handled the bench with care. He could tell she was checking if he really knew what he was doing. As Kelechi worked, he asked gently, "So, how do you manage everything alone? It must be a lot of work." He didn't want to pry too much, but he was curious about her life. Yewande hesitated for a moment. "I just do my best," she said in a low voice. "I have a small job at a boutique, and sometimes I help a friend who sells rice and stew. Femi goes to school nearby, but it's not easy. Things can get expensive." Kelechi nodded, focusing on the bench. "You must be very strong," he said quietly. "I respect that." Yewande gave a soft smile. "Thank you," she replied. "Life can be hard, but I keep going for Femi's sake." Just as Kelechi finished tightening the bench leg, they heard a sharp knock at the door. Yewande's eyes flickered with worry. She handed Femi a small snack and told him to go into the other room. Kelechi sensed something was wrong. When Yewande opened the door, a tall, broad-shouldered man stood there, looking angry and impatient. "Yewande," he said in a harsh tone, "I've been waiting for you at the corner. You didn't pick my calls." Yewande's voice shook a little. "Teo, what do you want?" she asked, stepping outside so Femi wouldn't hear. Kelechi stood quietly behind her, not sure what to do. Teo pushed the door open wider and looked around. His gaze landed on Kelechi, and he frowned. "Who's this?" he demanded. Yewande tried to stay calm. "He's just a carpenter helping me fix some furniture," she said, raising her chin. "That's all." Kelechi looked at Teo's clenched fists and felt a jolt of concern. Teo seemed like a man who liked control, and he clearly didn't like seeing someone else in Yewande's home. Teo pointed a finger at Kelechi. "Look here, I don't know you, but stay out of my business," he growled. Then he turned back to Yewande. "You owe me money, Yewande. I have debts to pay, and you can't keep ignoring me." Kelechi froze, not wanting to blow his cover. He also didn't want Teo to hurt Yewande, but he had to be careful. If he revealed how much he wanted to protect her, Teo might become suspicious, or Yewande might start to wonder who Kelechi really was. "I don't have any extra money," Yewande said firmly, crossing her arms. "You know I can barely take care of Femi and myself. Why are you here demanding things?" Teo snorted, stepping closer to her. "Because I'm tired of begging," he spat. "You know the trouble I'm in. Don't act like you're completely innocent. We used to be married." Kelechi couldn't keep silent any longer. He stood up and cleared his throat. "Excuse me, sir," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Is this really the right place to have this argument?" Teo rounded on him, glaring. "Who are you to speak? A broke carpenter? Don't test me." Yewande stepped between them, her face pale but determined. "Teo, please leave," she said. "I'll call you if I can find a way to help. But I can't do anything right now." Teo pointed at her again. "I'll be back soon. You better be ready with something." Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard that it rattled in its frame. Yewande stood there for a moment, her shoulders sagging. Kelechi noticed her eyes shining with tears she was trying to hold back. He stepped over gently. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she whispered. "Teo is my ex-husband. He's been in debt for years, and he always tries to force me to give him money. I don't have it, and even if I did, I'm not sure I want to help him." Kelechi glanced at the door. He felt anger boiling inside him, but he held it in. "He shouldn't treat you like that," Kelechi said, clenching his jaw. "But I understand if you don't want me involved." Yawanda wiped her eyes. "You've been very kind, Kola, but this is my problem to deal with. It just hurts me that he demands things when Femi and I are barely managing." Kelechi moved closer, lowering his voice so Femi couldn't hear from the other room. "I can help if you need it," he said. "I mean, I can talk to him, or maybe help you figure out some plan." He tried not to sound like he had endless resources. He was supposed to be just a simple carpenter, after all. Yawanda gave a small, sad smile. "That's very sweet, but Teo can be dangerous. I don't want you getting hurt." Kelechi noticed her protectiveness. She didn't want trouble for anyone. He admired that, but he also felt frustrated that Teo could come back anytime. "All right," he whispered. "Just know that you're not alone. I'm here if you need me." Yawanda nodded, then forced a little grin. "Thank you. Let's finish the bench so I can at least have one less thing to worry about." They both moved to the wooden seat. Kelechi pressed down on the leg he had fixed. It held steady, though the small crack in the seat still needed patching. He worked with care, grateful to have something else to focus on besides the tension in the room. When the bench felt solid, Yawanda tried sitting on it. "It's good," she said, her voice low but sincere. "I appreciate your help more than you know." At that moment, Femi peeked out from the hallway, eyes round with concern. He saw his mother sitting on the bench and slowly came closer. "Is it fixed now?" he asked timidly, glancing around as if worried Teo might still be there. Kelechi bent down to meet Femi's eye level. "Yes, it's fixed," he said, reaching out to pat the bench. "You can even jump on it if you want." Carefully, of course, Femi gave a tiny smile and tested it with a short hop, grinning when it didn't wobble. Yawanda put an arm around her son. "Thank you, Kola," she repeated, her voice calmer. "I'm sorry for all the drama." Kelechi shook his head. "No need to apologize. I just want you and Femi to be safe." He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was almost noon, and he had other customers waiting at his stall. "I should head back, but if you need me..." Yawanda gave a gentle nod. "I'll let you know." "Thank you." They walked him to the door, and Kelechi stepped out into the warm midday sun. His mind whirled with thoughts of Teo's angry face and Yawanda's frightened eyes. He wanted so badly to protect her, but he also had to keep his own secret. If he revealed his true identity, everything could fall apart. But if he didn't do something, Teo might keep hurting Yawanda and Femi. That made Kelechi's heart ache. As he made his way back to the market, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw several missed calls from an unknown number. He guessed it might be his father's office again, or possibly Emeka checking up on him. He decided not to call back just yet. His mind was still on Yawanda and the trouble she was facing. When he reached his workshop, Toby was sitting by the corner, happily munching on some puff-puff. "Oga Wood, you're back!" Toby shouted, jumping to his feet. "A woman came by looking for you. She has a broken chair. I told her you'd be back soon." Kelechi thanked Toby and quickly set down his small tool bag. Even though he had more work to do, he couldn't shake the image of Teo's angry glare. He opened his stall for business, trying to focus on the next job. But deep in his heart, he was already planning. He knew Yawanda deserved peace. He didn't know exactly how to help her yet, but he would find a way, even if it meant keeping his real identity hidden. He silently vowed to protect Yawanda and Femi from Teo's threats. And he hoped, in time, that Yawanda would come to trust him enough to share more of her life. "Tomorrow," Kelechi whispered under his breath, rearranging his tools on a wooden shelf. "I'll see what tomorrow brings. But I won't leave Yawanda to face this on her own." With that resolve, he forced a smile and turned to greet the next customer who stepped into his little carpentry stall. His heart weighed down by worry, yet fired up with a new sense of purpose. Kelechi woke the next morning feeling torn between relief and worry. On one hand, business at his small carpentry stall was growing. On the other hand, Teo's threat to Yawanda lingered in his mind. He got dressed quickly and hurried outside. The sun was already beaming down on Surulir's busy streets. Children laughed as they ran around, Shop owners called out deals, and the smell of fried yam filled the air. When Kelechi reached his stall, Toby was there again, hopping from foot to foot. "Oga Wood, I saved your spot," Toby said proudly. Kelechi smiled, patting the boy's shoulder. "Thank you, Toby. You're my best helper." He opened the stall, placed his tools on the old wooden table, and checked for any new repair jobs that might have arrived overnight. Sure enough, a broken chair stood in one corner with a note attached. "Many people trust you now," Toby said, noticing the broken chair. "They leave their things for you even when you're not here." Kelechi nodded, feeling a small surge of pride. "Yes," he said, "I'm happy people are giving me a chance." He recalled how, just a few days ago, everyone looked at him with suspicion. Now, the community was slowly accepting him as their local carpenter. While Kelechi sorted out the chair's wobbly leg, Toby observed carefully. "Someday, I want to be a carpenter too," the boy said. "Or maybe a policeman." Kelechi chuckled. "Both are good choices," he replied. "I just want you to follow your dreams, Toby, but be prepared to work hard." Toby nodded with bright eyes, then dashed off when his friend called him from across the street. A few minutes later, an older woman approached the stall. She wore a colorful wrapper and carried a basket of tomatoes. "My neighbor says you're good at fixing tables," she said. "I'm Mama Bose, and I have an old table at home with a broken corner. Can you repair it?" Kelechi agreed, smiling politely. "Yes, Ma. I can come by this afternoon," he said. Mama Bose beamed. "Thank you. Surulere needs people like you. People who do honest work and treat us well." After she left, Kelechi felt a small glow of happiness. This was very different from his old life. He was used to hearing empty praise from people who only cared about his wealth. But here, every thank you felt genuine. It made him want to keep going, no matter how hard the work became. By mid-morning, he decided to check on Yawanda. The memory of Teyo's anger nagged at him. Kelechi locked up his stall for a bit and headed toward her apartment. He found Yawanda outside, washing clothes in a small bucket while Femi stood nearby, rinsing a shirt. When she saw Kelechi, she gave him a soft smile. "Kola," she said, wiping her forehead. "How are you?" "I'm all right," Kelechi answered gently. "I just wanted to see if you're okay." After what happened with Teyo yesterday, Yawanda glanced at Femi, who was busy wringing out his shirt, then gestured for Kelechi to step aside so they could talk privately. "Teyo hasn't come back since then," she said in a low voice. "But I'm worried. He doesn't usually let things go so easily." Kelechi reached out and touched her arm lightly. "I'm sorry you have to deal with that," he said. "If he bothers you again, please let me know. I'll try to help." She tried to smile, though her eyes still showed fear. "Thank you. It's nice to have someone on my side." Just then, Femi walked up, eyeing Kelechi curiously. "Are you coming in, Uncle Kola?" he asked, tugging on Kelechi's hand. Kelechi laughed softly at being called Uncle. "Maybe later," he said, "but I have some customers waiting for me right now. I'll see you soon." "All right." Femi nodded, satisfied, and went back to his washing. On his way back to the market, Kelechi's phone started vibrating. He glanced at the screen and noticed it was Emeka calling. Worried it might be something urgent, he ducked into a quiet corner and answered. "Emeka," Kelechi whispered, keeping his voice low. "Is everything okay?" "Dude, I've been trying to reach you," Emeka said, his tone serious. "Your father's people keep asking where you are. I told them you traveled for business, but they're not satisfied. They want you back in Ikoyi." Kelechi's chest tightened. He knew this day would come. "I'm not coming back yet," he said firmly. "I'm doing something important here. Please cover for me as best you can." Emeka sighed. "All right," he replied, "but be careful, Kels. If your dad hires private investigators, they might find you in Surulere. And then all of this might blow up." Kelechi swallowed hard. "I'll keep an eye out," he said. "Thanks for helping me." Emeka lowered his voice. "You're my best friend, so I'll do what I can. But don't take too long. You know how your father can be." Then he ended the call. Kelechi shoved the phone back into his pocket, his mind spinning. He couldn't let Chief Obi find him yet. Not when he was just starting to feel like he could live a normal life. He returned to his stall, forcing a calm expression in case Toby or others noticed his worry. Around noon, Mr. Shola, Kalechi's longtime family lawyer, called as well. Kalechi didn't answer at first, but the calls kept coming, so he finally picked up. "Mr. Shola, I can't talk much," Kalechi said. "Listen carefully," the lawyer replied. "Your father is close to filing a missing person report. He thinks you might have been kidnapped or something. I've been stalling him, but you need to make some moves soon." Kalechi clenched his jaw. "Tell him I'm safe, but I need space. If you can say I sent you a message. Anything to keep him from searching for me." Mr. Shola hesitated. "I'll do what I can, but be careful, young master." "I'm not a master here," Kalechi said softly. "I'm just Cola now." Then he hung up, feeling that familiar tug of guilt for lying, yet determined to keep his secret a bit longer. He tried to shake off his anxiety by focusing on his carpentry. He worked on the broken chair, carefully sanding the rough edges and hammering in new nails. Eventually, Toby returned, eager to learn more. Kalechi showed the boy how to measure the pieces of wood accurately. Toby leaned in, watching every move. "Wow, Oga wood. You do this so easily," Toby said, admiration clear in his voice. Kalechi forced a small laugh. "It just takes practice," he said, handing Toby a tape measure. "Keep learning, and you'll become even better than me someday." An hour later, Yawanda stopped by the stall, her eyes lighting up when she saw Kalechi teaching Toby. "He's so happy," she remarked, smiling at the boy. "It's good to see him interested in something." Kalechi nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Toby's clever. He picks things up fast." Then he offered Yawanda a small chair to sit on. "How are you holding up?" he asked, lowering his voice. "I'm okay," she replied. "I just wanted to thank you for being there yesterday. It means a lot." She looked around, making sure nobody was listening. "I know you don't want trouble, but you still stood up for me." Kalechi shrugged, pretending it was no big deal. "I couldn't just stay quiet when Teo acted like that," he said. "Anyway, how can I fix things for you today?" Yawanda pulled a small basket from behind her back. "I brought you some food," she said. "Jollof rice with fried fish. I made it this morning." Kalechi's eyes widened. "That's so kind of you." "Thank you, Yawanda." He felt a warmth spread through his chest. He hadn't had a home-cooked meal like this in a while. "This looks delicious," he added, opening the lid slightly to smell the spicy rice. Yawanda looked pleased. "You've been working so hard, and I wanted to do something nice." Just then, Toby piped up, "Auntie Yawanda, can I taste some too?" Kalechi and Yawanda both laughed, and Yawanda handed him a small spoonful of rice. Toby's face lit up. "Yum!" he cried, hopping in place. The sweet moment was cut short when an older man from the next stall leaned over. "Cola, you have another customer waiting," he called, pointing to a woman who stood a few feet away. Kalechi sighed, but gave Yawanda a grateful look. "Thanks again for the food," he said. "I'll eat it as soon as I finish here." She nodded. "I'll leave you to your work. Take care, Cola." She waved to Toby and headed off, disappearing into the crowd. Kalechi felt a surge of contentment. Even though the day was scorching hot, and he had a growing list of repairs to handle, he was glad Yawanda seemed to trust him more now. He wanted to keep that trust safe. But as the afternoon wore on, he began noticing curious stares from a few neighbors. One woman murmured to her friend, glancing at Kalechi's stall. Another man walked by slowly, as though studying him. Kalechi tried to ignore it, but the feeling of being watched made his skin prickle. Later, while he was sealing a crack on a wooden shelf, a woman who sold vegetables nearby whispered to Toby, "Is that man really just a carpenter? He sounds too polished. I heard he knows big words." Toby shrugged, saying he didn't know anything except that Oga Wood was the best carpenter around. Still, Kalechi overheard enough to realize rumors were starting to swirl. He remembered how Teo had insulted him, calling him a broke carpenter. It was possible Teo's anger made him suspicious. Or maybe the neighbors simply noticed that Kalechi sometimes slipped up. using manners or phrases they weren't used to hearing in the area. Whatever the reason, Kelechi could tell that people were talking. When evening rolled in, Kelechi closed up his stall and slowly made his way back to his one-room apartment. He felt tired, but also uneasy. He couldn't let anyone figure out who he really was, especially not Teo. If Teo discovered Kelechi was actually a billionaire's son, he might try to use that information to scare or manipulate Yewande even more. Inside the dim room, Kelechi sat on his thin mattress and opened the small container of jollof rice Yewande had given him. The rich, peppery smell flooded his senses. As he ate, he let himself smile. No one had ever cooked for him like this before. In his old life, the chef made food for the whole family, but it wasn't personal. This meal tasted different. It tasted like care. After finishing, he sighed and lay back, staring at the ceiling. He could handle the rumors for now, but he knew they wouldn't go away on their own. He was also aware that Teo still posed a threat, and that his father's men might be closing in on him. He shut his eyes, hoping he could protect Yewande and her son while continuing to hide his identity. As the night wore on, faint sounds of music drifted from the street. Kelechi closed his eyes and thought about the day. Toby's bright smile, Mama Bose's trust, and Yewande's simple act of kindness. In many ways, this felt more real than any fancy party he'd ever attended in Ikoyi. Yes, the roads were bumpy, and the power failed often, but he was building something of his own. And for the first time in his life, his heart felt truly alive. Before he drifted off to sleep, he whispered a promise to himself. I'll handle the rumors, I'll help Yewande, and I'll figure out how to keep my secret safe just a bit longer. Then he let the hum of Surulir's night lull him, holding tight to the hope that tomorrow would bring another small victory, even if it also brought new challenges. Kelechi woke early, just like every other morning in Surulir. He had started to love the bright sunrise and the lively sounds around him. Even though he felt happy fixing furniture and helping neighbors, a small knot of worry grew in his stomach. He knew rumors were spreading about him. Some people whispered that he wasn't just a poor carpenter. He tried to shake off the fear as he headed to his stall. Toby was there, of course, holding a small broom and sweeping the ground. Oga Wood. Good morning, Toby shouted, smiling widely. Kelechi grinned back, grateful for the boy's endless excitement. But deep inside, he couldn't stop thinking about what might happen if someone from his old life recognized him. Shortly after Kelechi opened the stall, a man in a neat shirt and slacks appeared, stepping out of a sleek black car parked down the road. He walked through the market, looking around like he was searching for something or someone. Kelechi noticed him right away. The man looked out of place in the busy Surulir crowd. Kelechi's heart pounded. Could this man be working for Chief Obi? Toby eyed the stranger curiously. Who is that, Oga Wood? He asked in a whisper. Kelechi shook his head. I don't know, he said quietly. Maybe he's just lost. Don't worry about it. But he couldn't stop his hands from trembling a little. A moment later, the man locked eyes with Kelechi and started walking toward him. Kelechi's stomach flipped. To hide his panic, he pretended to focus on a broken stool. Toby stood by, looking confused. Are you Kola? The man asked, his voice smooth but serious. Kelechi nodded, forcing a smile. Yes, that's me. Can I help you? The man glanced at Toby and then back at Kelechi. I was told you're good at fixing things, he said, his tone flat. I have a table leg that needs repair. Kelechi's heart slowed down a bit. Maybe this was just a new customer. Yes, sir, I can fix it, he replied, trying to sound calm. Feel free to bring it by. The man stared at Kelechi for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Kelechi breathed a sigh of relief, but he couldn't ignore a strange feeling that the man was studying him carefully. Toby touched Kelechi's arm. He seemed scary, Oga Wood, Toby said. Kelechi patted Toby's shoulder. It's all right, Toby. I'm sure it's nothing, he lied, hoping to convince himself, too. As the day wore on, Yewande arrived, carrying a small bag of items she wanted Kelechi to repair. Good morning, she said, smiling as she set the bag down. I found these old wooden spoons in my kitchen. Could you sand them down and make them smooth again? Kelechi nodded. Of course, that's an easy fix, Then he lowered his voice. How are things at home? No more trouble from Teo? Yolanda looked away, her face tense. He hasn't come around in a couple of days. But I'm still worried. She paused, then gave Kelechi a brave smile. Thank you for asking. It helps to know someone cares. Just then, a woman selling fruits across the street called out loudly, Yolanda, come here, please. Yolanda looked concerned as she hurried over. Kelechi watched, confused. Was something wrong? A moment later, the fruit seller shot Kelechi a sharp look and said something that made Yolanda's eyes go wide. Yolanda turned slowly to stare at Kelechi. He couldn't hear their exact words, but he felt his heart begin to race. Finally, Yolanda came back, her face pale. Kola, is it true you're not who you say you are? She asked in a shaky voice. She said people have been talking, saying you might be someone rich, maybe hiding from trouble. Kelechi's throat went dry. He tried to keep his voice steady. I never told you anything that isn't true about my work. I'm a carpenter here. I want an honest life. Yolanda blinked, trying to make sense of his words. But are you from a rich family? Are you lying about everything else? Before Kelechi could respond, Toby pointed toward the road. Oga would look, he cried. Kelechi turned and saw Teo marching toward them, anger burning in his eyes. Yolanda gasped, grabbing Kelechi's arm. I told you to stay away from my business. Teo shouted, jabbing a finger at Kelechi. You think I don't know what's going on? People say you're loaded with money, just pretending to be poor. And you're trying to play hero with my family? Kelechi's heart pounded so loudly he could barely think. He wanted to deny it, to protect his secret, but Teo was causing a scene in front of everyone. The fruit sellers and passing customers paused to watch. Yolanda stepped in front of Teo. Even if Kola has money, that doesn't change the fact that you keep threatening me, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I'm tired of you showing up just to scare us. Teo glared at Yolanda, then turned back to Kelechi. You want to protect her from me? Go ahead. Give her all your billions or whatever you have. That won't change the fact that she's mine to deal with. Kelechi felt a surge of anger. He had spent his life avoiding drama, but seeing Teo talk like this made his blood boil. Don't talk about her like she's your property, Kelechi snapped. She left you for a reason. Teo took a step forward, fists clenched. The crowd around them held its breath. Yolanda's hands shook at her sides. Toby looked ready to dart away. But then, a loud gasp rippled through the onlookers. An older man in neat clothes stepped out from behind the crowd. Kelechi recognized him instantly. It was one of his father's personal aides, Mr. Adelik. Kelechi's mind spun. Why was he here? Mr. Adelik cleared his throat. Master Kelechi, he said in a low voice, his eyes darting around the crowd. Please, come with me. Your father is extremely worried. He sent me to find you. Gasps and whispers filled the air as Teo's jaw dropped. Yolanda stared at Kelechi with wide eyes. Toby clung to Kelechi's shirt, looking confused. Everyone realized the truth at once. Kelechi was not simply Kola. He was from a wealthy family, missing for weeks. Yolanda took a shaky step backward. So it's true, she whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. All this time, you've been lying about who you are? Kelechi's chest felt like it would burst. He wanted to explain why he had hidden his identity, to say he was only searching for real human connection. But words wouldn't come out. The entire market was silent, waiting for his response. Suddenly, Teo laughed in a harsh, mocking way. Look at that, a fake carpenter. So you're a billionaire? Huh. He turned to Yolanda. He's no better than me. Just another liar. Yolanda shot Teo a glare, but the pain in her eyes was clear. Kelechi tried to reach for her, but she stepped back again, tears slipping down her cheeks. You let me think you were poor. You let me share my struggles, all while hiding your life, she asked, voice trembling. Why, Kola, or whoever you are? Kelechi opened his mouth to speak, but Mr. Adelik grabbed his arm. We need to go now, the aide hissed. This is not safe for you. Your father. I don't care about what my father wants. Kelechi snapped, yanking his arm free. He stared at Yawanda, his heart aching. I did it to find the truth, to meet real people, to... Yawanda shook her head, wiping away a tear. Then why didn't you trust me with that truth? After all we shared, Kola. Her voice broke on his name, making his heart twist. You lied to me every single day. Before Kelechi could answer, Teo charged forward, pointing an accusing finger. Get out of here, rich boy, he shouted. Don't come near Yawanda again. You've done enough damage. The crowd began to murmur, some people shaking their heads in disapproval. Others just looked shocked. Toby's eyes filled with tears. He pulled on Kelechi's shirt. Oga Wood, you're leaving? Kelechi knelt down and hugged the boy. Toby, I'm so sorry, he whispered, voice thick with emotion. I never meant to hurt any of you. At that moment, Mr. Adeleke signaled to the driver, who started the black car's engine. Kelechi felt everything crumbling around him. He wanted to stay, to fix this, but the weight of his lies was crushing him. The market crowd parted as he slowly stood up and backed away. Yawanda stood there, her eyes full of pain and confusion. Teo glared at both of them, looking smug. Kelechi took one last look at Yawanda, longing to tell her he truly cared for her and Femi. But he saw the betrayal in her eyes, and it shattered him. Then he turned and followed Mr. Adeleke through the stunned onlookers. Toby's soft cries echoed behind him, mixed with Yawanda's quiet sobs. Teo shouted something cruel, but Kelechi barely heard it over the pounding of his own heart. The driver opened the car door, and Kelechi slipped inside. As the car pulled away, he stared out the window. The streets of Suralire blurred with color and life. Life he might never experience the same way again. He had come here searching for real love and real friendships. Now he was leaving with a broken heart and the painful truth that every lie has a cost. In the rearview mirror, Kelechi caught a final glimpse of Yawanda standing near his abandoned carpentry stall. Her shoulders were shaking, and the stool he'd once fixed for her lay overturned on the ground. Toby was at her side, tears in his eyes, and Teo loomed near, looking ready to swoop in with more demands. The car sped up, and then they vanished from sight. Kelechi pressed his forehead against the cool glass. He felt emptier than ever, wondering if he would ever have the chance to make things right, or if he had lost Yawanda forever. As he closed his eyes, one final thought pounded in his mind. What happens now? Kelechi stared out the car window, barely hearing Mr. Adeleke's constant chatter about how worried Chief Obi had been. The roads of Lagos sped by, but his mind was stuck in Suralire. He kept seeing Yawanda's tearful face, Toby's hurt expression, and Teo's smug grin. Each memory felt like a heavy stone in his chest. When they reached the massive gates of his family mansion in Ikoyi, Kelechi didn't feel any relief. If anything, the sight of tall walls and security guards only reminded him of the prison he had once called home. Chief Obi stood at the entrance, looking stern. The moment Kelechi got out of the car, his father's voice thundered. Kelechi, what is the meaning of this? You disappeared and had everyone worried. Kelechi didn't even flinch. He was too drained to argue. Father, I just needed space. I was tired of living like a puppet, he said softly. I found people who saw me as a person, not just your son. Chief Obi scowled. That's nonsense. Do you know how much damage this could cause our family's name? You belong here, not in some rundown market. Kelechi felt anger rise in his chest. He thought about Yawanda's struggles, Toby's dreams, and the real friendships he'd built. You don't understand, father, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. I did find something out there, real connections. But I lost it all because I couldn't be honest. Chief Obi waved a hand, dismissing Kelechi's words. We will fix this. We will tell the media you were away on important family business. Now go wash up and act like a proper Obi. Kelechi walked inside like a robot, each step feeling heavier. The mansion's shiny floors and grand chandeliers felt cold. He kept seeing Yawanda's eyes, filled with sadness when she learned who he really was. He couldn't live with himself if he left things like that. That night, Kelechi locked himself in his old bedroom, ignoring the many calls from curious friends and family. He thought about Yolanda and Femi, about Teo's threats, and about how everyone in Surulere now saw him as a liar. After hours of tossing and turning, he made a decision. He picked up his phone and dialed Mr. Shola, the family lawyer who had always been kind to him. "Mr. Shola, I need your help," Kelechi said quietly, glancing at the door to make sure no one was eavesdropping. "I want you to pay off Teo's debts. I don't care how much it is, but do it in a way that protects Yolanda. She can't know it comes from me." Mr. Shola hesitated. "Master Kelechi, this is risky. If your father finds out—" "I don't care," Kelechi cut in. "I won't let Teo keep harassing her. Please help me do this quietly." There was a short pause. Then Mr. Shola sighed. "All right, I'll handle it." The next morning, Kelechi dressed in simple clothes again. He told his father he had errands, but Chief Obi gave him a suspicious look. Still, Kelechi slipped out before more questions came. He had to see Yolanda one last time, no matter the cost. When he arrived in Surulere, he parked far from the market to avoid drawing attention. Heart pounding, he walked to Yolanda's apartment. The green door was shut tight, and he could hear faint voices inside. With shaky hands, he knocked. Femi opened the door halfway. He gasped when he saw Kelechi, then quickly slammed it. Kelechi's heart sank. He stood there for a few long seconds, unsure if Yolanda would even let him in. Finally, the door opened again. Yolanda looked at him with red, swollen eyes. "Kola," she began, then caught herself. Kelechi, why are you here?" He swallowed hard. "I had to see you," he whispered. "I'm sorry I lied about who I am. I only wanted to find someone who cared about me for me, not my family name." Yolanda's gaze flickered with pain. "Do you think your lie didn't hurt me?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I opened up to you about my problems. I trusted you, but you never trusted me enough to tell me your truth." Kelechi felt tears burn his eyes. "I was scared," he admitted. "Every woman I've met only wanted my money. I thought if you knew, I'd never know if you really cared." Silence filled the tiny space. Femi peeked around his mother's skirt, tears in his eyes too. "You left us," he said in a trembling voice. Kelechi bent down, looking at Femi. "I'm sorry," he said. "I wish I could fix things like I fix furniture. But it's not that simple." Yolanda looked away, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Teo is still causing trouble," she said at last. "He's angry, but he stopped demanding money all of a sudden. I don't know why." Kelechi gently took her hand. I asked someone to help with his debts. He won't bother you again, I promise." Yolanda's eyes widened in shock, and her voice wavered. "You did that for me?" Kelechi nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, because He paused, fear gripping him. Then he spoke, voice raw. "Because I truly care about you and Femi, and I'm ready to face any blame for what I did wrong." In that moment, footsteps sounded behind them. Kelechi turned and froze. Standing at the end of the hallway was Teo, fists clenched, face burning with rage. "You think you can pay me off and then pretend to be the hero?" Teo roared. "I'm not leaving until I get more." Yolanda gasped. Femi clung to her, and Kelechi stepped forward, heart pounding. Teo lunged, fist swinging wildly. Kelechi blocked the blow, but they both stumbled back. Yolanda screamed. Femi cried out. Noise echoed in the cramped hallway. Just then, neighbors came running, shouting for Teo to stop. The tension filled the air like a storm about to break. And in that split second, Kelechi realized things would never be the same. If he survived this fight, his secret was out, and his feelings were open for everyone to see. Their world had changed forever, but would it bring them closer or tear them apart? With Teo raging and Yolanda trembling, Kelechi braced himself for what came next. He refused to walk away again. One thing was certain. This battle in Surulere was far from over, and nothing would ever be simple again. A few days later, the whole neighborhood was still talking about what happened that day in Yolanda's hallway. Teo had tried to hurt Kelechi, but neighbors rushed in, pulling the two men apart. Someone called the police, and Teo was taken away, yelling he'd never be finished with them. Kelechi had a cut on his arm, but he cared more about the hurt in Yowanda's eyes. He stayed in Surulere a bit longer, waiting to see if she would talk to him. Femi kept his distance too, unsure if Kelechi was friend or foe. Kelechi felt like his heart was splitting in two. Part of him wanted to run back to his father's mansion and never face the pain again. But another part whispered that he owed Yowanda the truth over and over, until she believed he truly cared. Late one evening, he gathered his courage and knocked on Yowanda's door again. She opened it slowly, only peeking her head out. Her eyes looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. Femi stood behind her, gripping her skirt. "Kelechi," she said, her voice low. "What do you want?" He swallowed hard. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he began, forcing steady words. "My father needs me back, and I can't keep lying to him. But I couldn't go without seeing you one last time." Yowanda said nothing, her fingers trembling on the doorknob. Femi peered up, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "I know I messed up," Kelechi went on, his throat tight. "You have no reason to trust me again. But everything I felt here in Surulere, it was real. You and Femi made me see that a simple life can be filled with real love and warmth. I wish I could fix the damage I caused." A single tear slipped down Yowanda's cheek. "Then why lie from the start?" she asked in a hushed voice. "Why not tell me the truth when we got close?" Kelechi's shoulders sagged. "I was afraid," he whispered. "Afraid you'd see me as another man with money and not as Kola. I didn't know how to stop pretending once I cared." Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Yowanda opened the door a bit wider. Femi took a tiny step forward, hope flickering in his eyes, but neither said a word of forgiveness. Kelechi felt torn, not sure if there was any path forward. Finally, Yowanda spoke again, voice quivering. "You should go," she said. Maybe when everything is calmer we can talk. But not now." Kelechi nodded, tears burning his own eyes. He turned and walked away, each step heavier than the last. In his pocket, his phone buzzed, his father's call. Soon, he'd be back in that huge mansion, surrounded by wealth yet feeling more alone than ever. He glanced over his shoulder one last time, seeing Yowanda and Femi standing in the doorway like a faint silhouette in the growing dusk. He wanted to believe this wasn't truly goodbye. But as the shadows lengthened, Kelechi wondered if he'd ever truly win back their trust, or if he would forever remain an outsider, longing for the life he almost had. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe. Here is another interesting story to watch. Click to watch now.